March 23, 1945, 0207 hours. East bank of the Rhine River, near the shattered German town of Rhine. Cold mist crawls across the water. Searchlights sweep the opposite bank in slow, nervous arcs. Somewhere beyond the fog, a German sentry coughs, then falls silent. On a muddy field just behind the tree line, a convoy halts without headlights. Engines cut, doors open softly. Men step out carrying canvas bundles. Not rifles, not ammunition crates. Canvas. Private First Class Arthur Shilstone shoulders his pack and moves fast. He is 20 years old, an art student from New York, now wearing the patch of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. Around him, others unload compressors, rubberized fabric, crates of paint, and reels of wire thicker than a man's thumb. Across the river, elements of the German 84th Infantry Division brace for what they believe will be the main Allied crossing. They have reinforced their positions, sighted their 88's registered artillery coordinates. They are waiting for tanks. They are about to get them, except the tanks are made of rubber. Under blackout conditions, the men of the 23rd move with rehearsed precision. Air compressors sputter to life. Choked low to avoid detection. Dark shapes begin to swell across the field. First flat, then rounded, then unmistakable. An entire armor battalion materializes in the fog. Inflatable M4 Sherman tanks rise from the mud, their canvas hulls stiffening as air fills their chambers. Dummy half-tracks line up beside them. Even inflatable artillery pieces are positioned wheel to wheel. From a distance, through field glasses, they are flawless. Sergeant Fred Fox, formerly a commercial illustrator, crawls through the mud with a paint kit, brushing shadows and false tread marks into the earth. Details matter. German aero reconnaissance has sharp eyes. So do German gunners. A few hundred yards away, technicians from the unit's signal company begin erecting massive loudspeakers. They angle them toward the far bank and unspool cables back to armored trucks. Inside those trucks are wire recorders loaded with carefully captured audio. Real tank engines. Real tracked vehicles grinding over steel bridges. Real infantry columns marching in cadence. The recordings were taken from the 6th Armored Division weeks earlier. Tonight, they will be ghosts. At 0315 hours, the speakers come alive. Low at first, a murmur of engines, the metallic clank of treads, officers barking orders. Then louder, the sound rolls across the Rhine like a physical force. On the eastern bank, German listening posts stiffen. Field telephones crackle. Reports rush up the chain of command. Panzer units massing. Bridging equipment detected. Large armor presence opposite Rhine. In the fog, the illusion feels real. You can almost see the silhouettes moving. Back on the western bank, the 23rd continues working. Fake divisional insignia are stenciled onto vehicle panels. Radio operators transmit scripted chatter, imitating the call signs and procedural habits of the U.S. 30th Infantry Division. They argue about rations. They request artillery support. They complain about mud. Every word is intentional. Captain George Reb oversees the scene, binoculars raised, listening not for German fire but for German reaction. The unit has one mission: convince the Wehrmacht that the main Allied thrust will cross here. In reality, General Omar Bradley's forces are preparing to cross miles away. Real bridging units assemble under tighter secrecy. Real engineers check explosive charges. Real infantry wait in silence. But here, on this muddy patch of earth, theater becomes weapon. At 0342 hours, the first German artillery shell lands. It whistles in from the east and detonates 30 yards from an inflatable Sherman. Mud and canvas jump together. Men flatten instinctively. Another shell follows, then another. The barrage tightens. The Germans have taken the bait. Shilstone presses his face into the dirt as shrapnel slices the air overhead. He knows the tanks beside him are hollow. One direct hit will collapse them like punctured lungs. But that is the point. Every shell fired here is a shell not fired at the real crossing. German artillery intensifies, walking its fire across the phantom armor. Inflatable trucks rupture and sag. A fake half-track flips uselessly. Yet in the chaos and darkness, it does not matter. from across the river. It looks like devastation inflicted on a real armored column, which means the enemy believes it is real. At 0410 hours, German commanders divert reserve units toward Rhine. Infantry companies reposition. Anti-tank gun swivel. Precious time and manpower shift north, away from the actual Allied objective. Inside one of the sound trucks, technician fourth grade Bill Blass adjusts the volume. He increases the engine noise, then overlays recorded bridge construction. Hammering, chains, metal clatter. Across the Rhine, binocular lenses focus. The ghost army grows louder. Dawn begins to thin the darkness. Fog lifts in pale ribbons. The inflatable battalion stands exposed in gray light, absurd and fragile up close. From the east bank, through distance and expectation, it is formidable. German guns continue firing. Smoke rises. Reports confirm heavy American armor massing opposite Rhine. Reinforcements are ordered forward, and miles away, under far lighter resistance, the real Allied assault begins crossing the Rhine. The 23rd Headquarters Special Troops watches the horizon carefully. They are unarmed, outnumbered, and holding the line with air and sound. But if the Germans realize the truth before the real crossing is secure, this field will become a killing ground. In the growing light, another shell screams overhead, closer this time. March 23, 1945, 0618 hours. Western bank of the Rhine, north of Rhine. Dawn breaks without warmth. Frost clings to the canvas hull of a punctured Sherman decoy, its sides sagging like torn skin. Smoke from German artillery drifts low across the field, mixing with river fog and the oily scent of compressors. Private Shilstone lifts his head. Another shell detonates behind the tree line. Dirt rains down in a hard, metallic patter. Keep inflating, someone shouts. The order sounds insane. Inflate targets under artillery fire. But that is exactly what they do. Replacement decoys are dragged forward. Fresh canvas tanks rise again into shape, as if the armor battalion refuses to die. The Germans are adjusting their fire. That means they are watching. Inside a camouflage M3 half-track fitted with loudspeakers, technician Bill Blass leans over the wire recorder. His headset crackles with faint feedback. He switches reels, threading magnetic tape with steady hands despite the concussion thudding through the chassis. A new sequence begins. Tank engines rev higher. Tracks grind against metal planking. Officers shout over the roar. A bugle call cuts briefly through static. It sounds like an entire division preparing to cross. Across the Rhine, observers report increased American activity. German artillery batteries near Emmerich and Wesel receive new coordinates. Counter-battery units reposition. A Luftwaffe reconnaissance flight is requested, though Allied air superiority has made such missions dangerous and rare. Captain George Reb watches through binoculars as fresh plumes of smoke rise from the eastern bank. Movement. Trucks. Gun crews hauling equipment into revised positions. They're shifting, he says quietly. That is the confirmation he needs. Miles south, near Oppenheim, real bridging units of the U.S. Third Army are assembling pontoons under far lighter resistance than expected. Engineers slide sections into the river. Infantrymen crouch low, waiting for the order to cross. They have no idea that a group of artists is absorbing German fire on their behalf. Back at Rhine, the 23rd escalates the illusion. Radio operators from the signal company tap out coded transmissions, mimicking the traffic patterns of the U.S. 30th Infantry Division. Call signs match authentic records. Procedural errors are inserted deliberately to make it believable. You cannot fake perfection. Real units are messy, so the Ghost Army is messy. Red Dog 6. This is Blue Fox Actual. Request artillery prep grid Baker 27. Static. A pause. Blue Fox, wait 1. We got traffic on that net. German intercept teams pick up the chatter. Translators scribble notes. The picture forming on the eastern bank is consistent. Armor concentration. Artillery requests. Bridging preparation. By 0745 hours, German commanders commit additional reserves to the Rhine sector. Infantry companies from the 84th Infantry Division move through frozen orchards toward defensive lines. Anti-tank guns are dug deeper. Ammunition trucks roll north. Every vehicle redirected here leaves another sector thinner. The artillery barrage intensifies. A direct hit collapses two inflatable Shermans in a single blast. Canvas shreds whip into the air. Air escapes in a violent hiss. For a split second, the absurdity is exposed. A tank folding like a deflated balloon. Shillstone feels the sting of it, but distance hides the truth. From across the river, through smoke and magnification, it looks like armor destroyed in place. Proof that a real assault is underway. Medics move quickly among the ghost army. They are not supposed to need medics. Yet shrapnel does not care whether you carry a rifle or a paintbrush. A corporal from the 603rd Engineer Camouflage Battalion lies bleeding from his thigh, teeth clenched against the cold. He is dragged to cover while another decoy is pulled into position. The illusion cannot pause. At 0830 hours, the sound truck shift frequency. Now comes a rumble of heavy bridging equipment. Metal clanks echo across the water. Chains drag. Engines strain. On the eastern bank, German artillery pivots toward the perceived crossing point. Shells splash into the Rhine near Ries, sending columns of water skyward. Gunners attempt to bracket the imaginary bridge. They are firing at ghosts. South of them, American engineers complete the first operational pontoon bridge with minimal interference. Infantry of the 5th Infantry Division begin crossing in organized waves. Real steel meets real current. The diversion is working, but the longer it continues, the greater the risk. Daylight sharpens visibility. If German reconnaissance spots a deflated seam, a misplaced shadow, an absence of track depth, the deception could unravel instantly. Captain Reb orders the decoys repositioned slightly to simulate tactical adjustment under fire. Crews tug ropes, shifting inflatable armor into new alignments. Bulldozers carve deeper tread marks into the mud to reinforce the illusion. Overhead, distant engine noise grows. Heads tilt upward. A single German Focke-Wulf reconnaissance aircraft appears briefly between cloud layers, banking toward the sector. If the pilot descends low enough, if he studies the field carefully, he will see fabric. He will see air hoses. He will see men without heavy weapons guarding a phantom army. The aircraft dips lower. Anti-aircraft guns from nearby Allied units open fire, black bursts flaring in the sky. The fighter veers, climbs, and disappears back into cloud cover. No confirmation. For now, the secret holds. By late morning, German command categorizes Ries as a primary assault point. Reinforcement orders are finalized. Defensive fire is concentrated, exactly as planned. In the mud beside a half-collapsed inflatable tank, Shillstone exhales slowly. The ground still trembles from artillery, but farther south the real river crossing is underway, almost uncontested. He does not see it. He only hears another shell incoming, and this one sounds different. March 23rd, 1945, 1,126 hours. Western bank of the Rhine, Ries sector. The incoming shell does not whistle. It shrieks. Shillstone barely turns before it detonates inside the perimeter of the decoy park. The blast punches the air from his lungs and throws him sideways into frozen mud. For a moment there is no sound at all, only a high, metallic ringing inside his skull. Then everything returns at once. Shouts. Another impact. Canvas tearing like sailcloth in a storm. A direct hit has obliterated 3 inflatable Shermans in a row. Air hoses whip violently across the ground. One loudspeaker tower collapses, its wooden frame splintered, wires snapping like exposed veins. "Move the rig," someone yells. Technicians scramble toward the damaged sound truck as artillery begins to walk methodically across the field. The German gunners have refined their range. This is no longer speculative fire. It is targeted. Captain George Reb drops to a knee behind a shallow berm and studies the eastern bank through binoculars. Smoke clears just enough to reveal movement. German infantry are advancing closer to the river's edge, setting up forward observation posts. They want visual confirmation. If they see too clearly, the illusion dies. Reb lowers the glasses. Shift everything 50 yards west. Make it look like we're repositioning under fire. Orders ripple outward. Men drag sagging decoys through mud while shells burst around them. Bulldozers grind forward, carving exaggerated tread patterns to simulate armor withdrawal and regrouping. It is theater under bombardment. Inside the remaining sound truck, Bill Blast wipes blood from a shallow cut above his eyebrow. A shard would caught him when the speaker tower fell. He threads a fresh wire spool with steady hands. "Give me assault phase 3, he says into his headset. A new audio sequence roars to life. This one is louder, bridging operations. Heavy Bailey Bridge components clanking into place. Officers shouting for engineers to secure spans. The splash of equipment hitting water. The volume surges. Across the Rhine, German artillery responds instantly. Shells crash into the river in tight succession, attempting to destroy a bridge that does not exist. Water geysers skyward in violent plumes. The deception has escalated. By noon, intelligence officers on the eastern bank report to higher headquarters that American forces appear committed to a large-scale crossing at Rhine. Requests for additional anti-tank reserves are transmitted urgently. Those reserves are pulled from sectors farther south, from sectors where real American infantry are now securing footholds. At 1,238 hours, a new threat emerges. German mortar teams, closer to the river than before, begin lobbing rounds with disturbing accuracy. One shell lands within 10 yards of the radio operations tent. Another detonates beside a cluster of inflatable trucks, shredding two completely. Shillstone crawls to a collapsed decoy, knife in hand. He slices open a ruptured seam deliberately, flattening the remaining structure, so it resembles destroyed armor rather than faulty equipment. Even failure must look convincing. A medic slides beside him, dragging the wounded camouflage corporal to relative safety behind a tree line. Blood stains the snow dark red. They were told their unit would avoid direct combat. They were told their weapon was deception. Yet here they are, under sustained fire from a determined enemy who believes he faces an armored division. Captain Reb receives a field telephone update from higher command. The real crossings to the south are succeeding beyond expectation. Casualties are lighter than projected. German resistance is fragmented. The diversion is buying time. But German patience is thinning. At 1,315 hours, observers report increased enemy reconnaissance along the riverbank. Field glasses sweep the western shore more deliberately now. A machine gun team sets up near a stone farmhouse opposite the decoy park. Its barrel trained across the water. If they spot men moving among rubber tanks without visible armored crews, questions will be asked. Reb makes a decision. Bring up the dummy artillery. Engineers haul inflatable 155mm howitzers into forward positions. Crews pantomime loading procedures in full view of distant observers. A staged muzzle flash device ignites, producing smoke bursts synchronized with pre-recorded artillery fire played through speakers. The illusion becomes aggressive. German batteries answer immediately, trading fire with guns made of fabric and compressed air. You can almost feel the confusion building on the eastern bank. Reports contradict each other. Some observers insist they see real armor. Others note odd movement patterns. Intelligence officers argue over the authenticity of intercepted radio chatter. War thrives on certainty. The ghost army feeds it doubt. At 1,402 hours, the mortar fire ceases abruptly. A strange quiet settles over the field. No shells, no machine gun bursts. Only the distant hum of engines from somewhere beyond the fog. Shillstone notices it first. The silence. He lifts his head slowly. Across the Rhine, German infantry are no longer merely observing. They are assembling assault boats along the shoreline. If they attempt a probing crossing, even a small one, they will discover the truth within minutes. Canvas cannot return fire. Compressed air cannot hold a riverbank. Captain Reb sees the same movement through his binoculars. German pioneers pushing rubber rafts toward the water's edge. Officers pointing, gesturing, testing. The deception has drawn them in. Now the enemy wants proof. March 23, 1945. 1,459 hours. West bank of the Rhine, opposite Rhine. The first German assault boat slips into the water without ceremony. For infantrymen paddle low and fast, helmets barely visible above the gunwales. A second raft follows 20 yards behind. No artillery covers them. This is not a full crossing. It is reconnaissance by blood. Captain George Reb lowers his binoculars slowly. Around him, the men of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops freeze in place. Inflatable artillery tubes point uselessly toward the east. Loudspeakers sit silent for the first time all day. If those boats reach the western shore unopposed, the illusion ends. They will find rubber tanks, painted shadows, speakers wired to nothing, and fewer than 1,000 lightly armed men standing in for a full U.S. division. Reb turns to his operations sergeant. Signal the 79th. Now! A field telephone line, hastily strung through trees and shallow trenches, connects a ghost army to elements of the real 79th Infantry Division positioned several miles to the rear. The 23rd was never meant to hold ground alone. They were always a screen, thin as smoke, relying on nearby combat units to prevent disaster. The line crackles. Coordinates are relayed. On the river, the German rafts cut through the current steadily. Mortar tubes on the eastern bank stand idle, ready to respond if resistance appears. The paddles dip and rise in measured rhythm. Shillstone grips an M1 carbine, knuckles white. He has rehearsed staging maneuvers a dozen times. He has practiced fake artillery drills, radio scripts, and vehicle placement under aerial photography. He has never trained for this. Hold until they're committed. Reb orders quietly. The boats are halfway across now. One soldier shifts position, adjusting his MP-40. They expect light opposition at most. Perhaps rear echelon troops guarding a temporary assembly area. They do not expect disciplined infantry. At 1,512 hours, the western tree-line erupts. Rifle fire cracks and control volleys from concealed foxholes. A Browning M1919 machine gun opens up from a camouflage nest that had remained deliberately silent all morning. Tracer rounds slash across the water. The lead raft jolts as bullets punch through its side. One German tumbles backward into the river. Another drops his paddle, clutching his chest. The second boat veers, men scrambling in panic as rounds stitch the current around them. Within seconds, the probing attack collapses. Survivors paddle frantically back toward the eastern shore. Across the Rhine, German officers shout for covering fire, but the response is hesitant. They have believed they faced armor. Instead, they have drawn small arms from well-positioned defenders. Confusion spreads again. Are these advanced infantry protecting tanks behind them? Are the armored elements concealed deeper in the woods? The uncertainty is exactly what the 23rd needs. Reb does not allow pursuit fire. The machine gun falls silent after discipline bursts. The message has been delivered. The western bank is defended. Moments later, distant thunder rolls from the south. Not artillery aimed at Rhine. Artillery aimed elsewhere. Reports filter through command channels. The real crossings farther downriver are expanding rapidly. Bridgeheads are solidifying. American infantry and armor are pushing inland. German reserves diverted north are arriving too late to influence the main assault. But the danger here is not over. At 1,545 hours, German artillery resumes with renewed fury. The failed probe has stung. Shells hammered the decoy park with punishing precision. One explosion overturns a loudspeaker truck entirely, crushing its frame and silencing half the sound system. Another blast collapses multiple inflatable howitzers at once, canvas snapping violently in the shockwave. Shillstone and two others sprint forward under fire to resecure loose decoy panels flapping in open view. If the Germans see the inner seams, the reinforced stitching, the air valves, questions will no longer be theoretical. A mortar round detonates close enough to throw them flat. Dirt fills mouths and eyes. For a moment, the field looks absurd. Rubber armor sagging under shrapnel. Artists crawling through mud beside deflated tanks. Sound engineers clutching rifles, as if they have always been infantry. And yet the illusion holds. At 1,620 hours, German observers once again report significant American activity opposite Rhine. The small arms resistance has reinforced the perception of a defended armor crossing site. The earlier probe is interpreted as a necessary test against entrenched U.S. forces. Higher German command maintains its assessment. Rees remains a primary threat, exactly as the Ghost Army intended. As dusk approaches, the artillery slackens. Smoke drifts low across the churn field. Inflatable replacements are dragged into place yet again. Compressors cough back to life. New silhouettes rise against the fading light. Shillstone watches another Sherman take shape beside him, its turret swelling with air until it resembles hardened steel. He runs a gloved hand along its cold canvas flank. It feels fragile. It has saved lives today. But night is coming, and German commanders are not fools. If they launch a larger assault under cover of darkness, if they commit real strength across the river, the 23rd will not withstand it for long. Across the Rhine, signal flares begin to rise. Green, then red. Preparations are underway. March 23, 1945, 1938 hours. Western bank of the Rhine, Rees sector. Darkness returns with a biting wind off the river. The last of the daylight bleeds out behind a bank of low clouds, leaving the shattered fields in shades of charcoal and steel. Then the flares begin again. Green arcs climb over the eastern bank. Red follows. White bursts hang in the air, illuminating the river in harsh, ghostly light. For a split second, every inflatable tank, every torn canvas seam, every crouched figure on the western shore is exposed in stark relief. Shillstone freezes under the glare. If German observers study carefully enough, they will see it. The unnatural stillness of rubber armor, the absence of exhaust smoke, the wrong geometry in the shadows. The light fades. Darkness rushes back in. Across the Rhine, engines start. Low at first, then building. Captain George Reb raises his binoculars, even though he can barely see. The sound carries clearly over the water. Not a handful of paddles this time. Multiple craft. He counts silhouettes forming along the shoreline. This is no probe. This is a battalion-strength crossing attempt. Field telephones crackle as Reb coordinates again with the nearby elements of the 79th Infantry Division. Real rifle companies are moving into supporting positions behind the thin screen of the 23rd. Mortar crews are adjusting tubes. Machine gun teams settle into prepared nests. The Ghost Army was never meant to stand alone. But tonight, they will be the first line. At 2006 hours, German artillery opens in a deliberate preparatory barrage. Shells march across the decoy park in tight, systematic patterns. The earth convulses. Inflatable Shermans collapse in violent waves. Loudspeaker towers splinter. One compressor explodes outright, sending fragments spinning through the darkness. Men dive into shallow trenches, covering their heads as shrapnel tears overhead. The barrage shifts toward the treeline. They are softening the bank. Then the river erupts with motion. Dozens of assault boats push off at once. Engineers paddle hard while infantry crouch low with Carabiner 98K rifles and MP40S clutch tight. Some craft tow light equipment. Others carry what look like machine gun teams. Searchlights snap on from the eastern side, beams slicing across the water. Reb waits. Closer, closer. At 2018 hours, he drops his arm. The western shore detonates in disciplined fury. Rifle volleys crash out in coordinated bursts. Browning machine guns hammer streams of tracer fire that rake the river's surface. Mortars from the 79th Infantry Division arc overhead, plunging into clustered boats midstream. One raft disintegrates in a spray of wood and bodies. Another overturns, spilling men into the freezing current. Screams carry across the water, cut short by gunfire and drowning. The illusion has transformed into a killing zone. German return fire lashes the treeline. Bullets chew bark from trees. Mortar rounds thud into shallow foxholes. A machine gun position to Shillstone's right goes silent after a direct hit. He does not think. He fires in controlled pairs, just as he was shown weeks ago. The recoil feels alien in his hands, nothing like a paintbrush or a charcoal pencil. Beside him, Bill blast feeds ammunition into a machine gun, jaw clenched tight. His loudspeaker truck burns 30 yards behind them, the metal frame glowing dull orange. The crossing attempt falters under the storm of fire. German officers on the eastern bank shout desperately, urging more boats forward, but confusion spreads quickly. Some units hesitate. Others collide in the dark. Mortar rounds land among them with devastating precision. Within minutes, the river is chaos. At 20:34 hours, the remaining assault boats begin pulling back. Not in order, not in formation. In retreat, the water churns with debris and drifting bodies. Gradually, the firing tapers off. The 23rd and the 79th hold their positions, scanning for renewed movement. None comes. Across the Rhine, artillery fires sporadically, more in frustration than coordination. The large-scale crossing has failed. For now, smoke drifts low over the battlefield. The decoy park is shattered beyond recognition. Inflatable armor lies deflated and torn, half buried in churned mud. Loudspeakers are wrecked. Several men from the 23rd lie wounded, two unmoving beneath blankets already stiff with frost. They were artists, designers, sound engineers. Tonight, they were infantry. Reb receives a fresh report from Corps headquarters. The genuine Allied crossings to the south have expanded dramatically. Armor is pouring across established bridges. German defensive cohesion is unraveling in multiple sectors. The reserves pulled toward Rhine never arrived where they were most needed. The deception has achieved strategic effect. But the night is not over. At 2,147 hours, a distant rumble rolls along the eastern bank. Heavier than boats, deeper than trucks. Through binoculars, Reb sees silhouettes shifting in the darkness. Tanks, real ones. German armor is moving into position opposite Rhine. If they decide to force a crossing at first light, no inflatable battalion will slow them. And this time, artillery alone may not be enough. March 24th, 1945, 0432 hours. Western bank of the Rhine, Rhine sector. The cold before dawn feels heavier than the night before it. Frost coats the shredded canvas of the decoy park, stiffening torn seams into brittle shapes that resemble frozen wounds. Smoke from burned-out loudspeaker trucks hangs low over the field. Then the engines begin. Deep, rhythmic, unmistakable. Across the river, German armor moves into view. Silhouettes of Panzer IVs and at least two Panther tanks roll toward the shoreline, their tracks grinding over stone and frozen soil. Turrets pivot slowly, testing arcs of fire across the water. Infantry cluster around them, dark shapes moving with renewed purpose. Captain George Reb watches through binoculars, jaw tight. The failed night crossing has not discouraged the enemy. It has escalated their commitment. They intend to crush what they believe is an armored American bridgehead forming at Rhine. Behind the thin screen of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, anti-tank teams from the supporting 79th Infantry Division settle into prepared positions. Bazooka crews check rockets. Artillery observers calculate new firing data. The ghost army stand in front of them, battered and nearly stripped of its illusions. Only a fraction of the inflatable armor remains intact. Compressors were destroyed in the night. Sound rigs lie twisted and silent. Deception now depends on what is left. At 0507 hours, the first German tank halts near the eastern bank and fires. The 75mm shell screams across the river and detonates inside the decoy park. The explosion rips apart the remains of an inflatable Sherman, sending canvas fragments skyward like torn flags. A second tank fires. Another decoy collapses in an instant from the German perspective. They are methodically destroying American armor before a daylight crossing. The illusion still shapes their actions. Reb turns to the remnants of his sound team. One last sequence, he says. Bill Blass and two others drag a surviving speaker array upright, propping it with sandbags and splintered beams. A portable generator sputters to life. The wire recorder spins. And suddenly, through the dawn haze, the roar of dozens of American tank engines fills the air. Louder than before, angrier, intermixed with shouted commands and the metallic clang of tracked vehicles maneuvering into counterattack positions. The sound rolls across the Rhine like a challenge. On the eastern bank, German crews hesitate. Through binoculars and periscopes, they see shattered decoys and rising smoke. But they also hear the unmistakable growl of massed armor. The illusion exploits a fundamental truth of warfare. What you hear often shapes what you believe you see. At 0523 hours, German artillery resumes in coordination with the tanks. Shells hammer the tree line. attempting to suppress the perceived American buildup. The barrage is intense but imprecise. They are firing at sound and expectation, not confirmed targets. Behind the Ghost Army, American artillery answers. 155 millimeters howitzers from concealed batteries inland thunder to life. Their shells arc high over the 23 RD's position and crash into German armor concentrations along the eastern bank. One Panzer IV erupts in flame. Another reverses abruptly, smoke pouring from its engine deck. Infantry scatter for cover. The exchange grows violent. Shilstone crouches behind the skeletal frame of a ruined speaker tower, heart pounding as concussion waves slam through the frozen ground. He is close enough to see the flash of German tank guns across the river, close enough to feel the shock of American counter-battery fire. This is no longer theater. It is steel against steel. At 0558 hours, German engineers attempt to push a heavier bridging element toward the shoreline under tank cover. A half-track towing equipment is struck by American artillery and flips violently, blocking the approach road. Confusion spreads again among German ranks. Reports clash. Some observers insist multiple American armored units are entrenched opposite Rhine. Others question why so few visible vehicles remain. Doubt widens the cracks. By 0625 hours, Allied air power enters the equation. The low rumble overhead builds into the distinct roar of P. 47 Thunderbolts diving through thinning cloud cover. Rockets streak toward German armor positions. One Panther is hit along its flank, exploding in a burst of fire and smoke. The eastern bank becomes a killing ground. German commanders reassess quickly. The cost of forcing a crossing here is rising beyond acceptable limits. Intelligence already suggests stronger American gains farther south. Committing more armor at Rhine may bleed resources needed elsewhere. At 0647 hours, the German tanks begin pulling back from the shoreline, not in panic, but in measured withdrawal. Smoke screens are deployed. Surviving infantry retreat towards secondary defensive lines. The immediate threat of a dawn crossing evaporates. On the western bank, silence creeps back slowly. The decoy park is ruined beyond further use. Inflatable tanks lie flattened and torn beyond repair. The last speaker falls silent as its generator sputters dry. The Ghost Army has exhausted its illusions, but the mission has succeeded. Reports confirm that real Allied armored columns are pouring across the Rhine, unopposed in sectors stripped of German reserves. Bridgeheads are expanding rapidly. Momentum has shifted decisively. Shilstone stands and looks across the river at the retreating German silhouettes. He realizes something quietly profound. They were never meant to win by firepower. They were meant to win by belief. And belief held long enough. Yet as the smoke clears, new orders arrive over the field telephone. The 23rd Headquarters Special Troops is being reassigned immediately. Another sector, another deception, another army to conjure from air. March 24th, 1945, 1035 hours. West bank of the Rhine, outskirts of Rhine. The battlefield smells of burnt rubber and cordite. What remains of the decoy park lies flattened across churned earth, canvas hulls ripped open and half buried in mud. Inflatable Shermans that hours ago looked formidable now resemble discarded stage props after a violent performance. And yet, across the river, German observers still hesitate. They do not advance. They do not attempt another crossing. They watch. Captain George Reb receives final confirmation over the field telephone. The real Allied bridgeheads to the south are secure. Armor is advancing inland. German defensive lines are collapsing in sectors stripped of reinforcements. The deception has done its work. Now the Ghost Army must disappear. Orders are short and precise. Strike everything. Leave nothing identifiable. Move within 2 hours. The men of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops move with quiet efficiency. What took hours to inflate and arrange is dismantled in minutes. Canvas is slashed deliberately, folded and stuffed into trucks. Torn speaker cones are removed. Wiring is ripped from the soil. Paint stencils are burned. Even the false tread marks carved into mud are partially obscured by bulldozers dragging debris across the field. The battlefield transforms again. From across the Rhine, German binoculars observe what appears to be a battered American armored force withdrawing to reorganize. Vehicles are loaded. Trucks move west. Activity suggests regrouping, not evacuation. The illusion persists to the last second. Shillstone helps drag a deflated Sherman toward a waiting deuce-and-a-half truck. His gloves are stiff with frost and grime. A week ago, this same tank stood upright under artillery fire, convincing experienced German officers they faced real steel. Now it weighs almost nothing. That contrast unsettles him. Bill Blass supervises the removal of the final sound rig. The generator that powered the last sequence is dismantled and loaded. The wire recorder, dented but intact, is packed carefully into a crate marked only with unit codes. The weapon of sound goes silent. At 1,120 hours, the first convoy begins rolling westward. Engines start without fanfare. No flags. No insignia beyond standard markings. The 23rd leaves, as it always has, anonymous and uncelebrated. Behind them, supporting elements of the 79th Infantry Division remain in defensive posture, ensuring that any German probing will meet real resistance. Across the river, uncertainty deepens. German field reports describe heavy American activity earlier in the morning, followed by apparent withdrawal. Intelligence officers debate the meaning. Was the armored thrust merely a diversion? Were multiple American divisions involved? No clear answer emerges. That uncertainty forces caution. German commanders do not risk immediate pursuit. They cannot be certain what remains concealed beyond the tree line. By the time clarity begins to form, the ghost army is gone. At 1,305 hours, a German reconnaissance patrol cautiously approaches the eastern riverbank opposite the former decoy park. Through binoculars, they scan the western shore. No tanks, no artillery, only churned mud, shattered trees, and scattered debris that suggests heavy fighting. Some fragments of canvas remain half buried, but at distance they look like tarps or destroyed vehicle coverings. There is nothing obvious enough to expose the deception outright. German officers record the sector as previously contested by American armored forces, now repositioned. The focus shifts south, where real Allied advances are now undeniable. The ghost of vision has vanished into thin air. Miles away, moving along narrow French roads toward their next assignment, the men of the 23rd sit in silence in the backs of their trucks. Exhaust fumes mix with cold morning air. No one speaks much. They have just faced artillery, mortars, armor, and a battalion-strength assault. They have lost men, and they have done so without recognition. Official communiques will credit armored divisions and infantry regiments for the breakthrough across the Rhine. Histories will describe steel, firepower, and maneuver. Few will mention rubber tanks. Fewer still will describe a night when artists held a riverbank with speakers and staged gunfire. Shillstone leans back against a crate of folded canvas and closes his eyes briefly. In his mind, he still sees the flares rising over the river. Hears the engines that were never there. War is fought with bullets and bridges. But sometimes it is fought with imagination. Ahead, the convoy slows as military police wave them through a crossroads. New coordinates have been issued. Another German unit must be misled. Another sector must be distorted just long enough to shift the balance. Captain Reb studies a map on his lap, already calculating how to conjure the next illusion. The ghost army does not rest. It reappears wherever doubt can be weaponized. And somewhere ahead, another enemy commander will soon believe he faces an army that does not exist. April 1st, 1945, 1840 hours. Forward staging area near the German border. Rain falls in a steady, unremarkable curtain. It washes mud from boots, soot from canvas, and blood from memory. Trucks belonging to the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops sit parked in uneven rows beneath leafless trees. To any passing observer, they look like a routine signal unit awaiting orders. There is nothing routine about what they have done. In the days since the confrontation at Rhine, Allied armor columns have surged deep into Western Germany. Bridges across the Rhine carry a constant flow of men and machines. Reports from higher command describe collapsing German resistance, fragmented divisions, commanders struggling to respond to threats that seem to appear everywhere at once. Some of those threats were real. Some were air. Captain George Reb stands beneath a canvas awning, reading a brief field summary delivered without ceremony. It confirms what they suspected. German forces diverted to counter the perceived armored buildup. Near Rhine were unable to reinforce sectors farther south. The result was a faster, cleaner breakthrough. Casualty projections dropped significantly compared to pre-operation estimates. Numbers on paper. Behind those numbers are thousands of soldiers who crossed the Rhine without facing the weight of concentrated German reserves. Reb folds the document carefully. No medals accompany it. No public commendations. The 23 RD's operations remain classified. Their existence is barely acknowledged outside narrow command circles. Nearby, Shilstone kneels beside a partially repaired inflatable Sherman. He runs a brush across its surface, repainting scuffed sections where shrapnel tore through. The canvas smells faintly of rubber and solvent. It looks absurd in daylight, lying flat and harmless. At night, under searchlights and artillery flashes, it looked like war. Bill Blast checks the wire recorder components spread across a crate. Some reels are damaged from concussion shock, but many survived. Inside those coils of magnetic tape are the sounds that fooled German armor commanders and diverted artillery batteries. Engine noise, clanking tracks, voices rehearsed to sound urgent and real. The weapon of imagination, captured in sound waves. Rain intensifies briefly, drumming against metal truck roofs. In the distance, real artillery echoes as Allied forces continue pushing east. The front is moving rapidly now. German command cohesion is eroding, and still, the Ghost Army receives new assignments. Orders arrive before dusk. The unit will stage another deception near the Ruhr Valley, simulating the presence of a full infantry division preparing to encircle retreating German elements. Inflatable artillery will be positioned along ridgelines. False radio traffic will suggest aggressive maneuver operations. The cycle continues. No one cheers. They have learned that each illusion invites real fire. Later that night, in the dim glow of a shielded lantern, several men gather quietly. They speak of the river, of the flares, of the German assault boats drifting back in chaos. They do not frame it as heroism. They frame it as survival. One of the wounded camouflage engineers has been evacuated. Word is that he will recover. Another did not. His name will appear on casualty lists without explanation of how he died defending tanks made of air. History rarely records the fragile edges of victory. Weeks pass. April becomes May. Germany collapses under combined weight of Allied pressure from east and west. When surrender finally comes, it arrives not with drama, but with exhaustion. The war in Europe ends. The 23rd Headquarters Special Troops is quietly disbanded soon after. Equipment is inventoried. Inflatable tanks are packed into storage. Sound systems are cataloged and locked away. Records are sealed under classification. The men return home. Some resume careers in art. Some enter advertising. Some continue in military service. Few speak openly about what they did. When asked about the war, they mention general locations, ordinary duties. They do not describe a night they held a riverbank with illusion. Decades later, historians will uncover fragments of their story. Declassified files will reveal that an army of designers, painters, architects, and sound engineers once convinced seasoned German commanders they faced visions that were never there. They will learn about inflatable Shermans that absorbed artillery, about loudspeakers that projected phantom battalions across rivers, about radio operators who crafted believable chaos out of scripted transmissions. They will learn that deception, executed precisely, can save more lives than brute force alone. On that cold March night near Rhine, the outcome of a major river crossing hinged not only on steel and courage, but on imagination disciplined by military precision. The Ghost Army did not win battles in the conventional sense. It reshaped them. It bent enemy perception just long enough for reality to break through elsewhere. And when the smoke cleared, when the tanks rolled and the bridges held, the illusion dissolved, leaving behind only churned earth and unanswered questions on the far bank of the Rhine. An army appeared. It drew fire. It vanished. And in that vanishing, it changed the course of the war in ways few ever saw.